Today I'd like to talk about that boon to the historical researcher, city directories. I don't remember when I first learned about them, but I'm reasonably sure it was Myron Hotchkiss who introduced me to the idea that yes, there were other records other than telephone directories available to research, and they were city directories. I don't know when they first were published. I know that I've seen them going back to the 1860s in Ancestry.com's research materials. They listed individuals over a certain age. I believe it might have been 18. In many cases, they listed the occupation of the individual, and purely from a sexist standpoint, they also indicated the marital status of women if they were separately listed. The earliest Monrovia directory that we are aware of is the 1908-1909 Monrovia City Directory, published by one Edward F. Parker, and it's entitled Resident and Business Directory of Monrovia, California, a complete record of city government, institutions, societies, etc. Price, $2. The introduction, which is interesting, says, Monrovia's active growth commenced in 1904. Since this date, its growth has been rapid, steady, and substantial. Plug, plug, plug. The postal receipts for the fiscal year 1908 shows an increase over 1904 of 59%, while in money orders issued there has been a gain of 69%. It will be but a few months before the business at the post office will entitle the city to free delivery. Whoopee! Monrovia is primarily a hometown whose population is materially increased during the winter season. The permanent resident population at the date of this publication is 3,612, with a slight, perhaps, inflation factor. These residents point with pardonable pride to the 20 miles of improved streets. They don't talk about the 30 miles of dirt streets. The water system, schools, churches, public library, and other improvements characteristic of progress. And when we think of these two blessings we have learned to demand in Southern California, climate and scenery, well, Monrovia has been called the gem of the foothills, and we shall let the welcome visitors decide. Who wrote this? Anyway, but it does mention something interesting, which is active growth commenced in 1904. So what happened in 1903? The Pacific Electric arrived in Monrovia at Myrtle and Olive, which meant you could work in downtown Los Angeles, but you could commute out to the country, Monrovia, for example, and establish your residence here. I'm pretty sure that's what they're alluding to. So, for example, the first section gives city officers, clerk, fire department, etc., superintendent of schools, health officer, board of education, justice of the peace, J.B. Holloway, township constable, city marshal, deputy sheriff, library, board of trade, post office, park commissioners, and city engineer. In other words, an overview, a thumbnail sketch of city government. It lists churches, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 churches listed. Among the more interesting, the Holiness Tabernacle. Reverend Adams, pastor, South Ivy between Orange and Olive. There's been a rumor that this was the church of the local Holy Rollers. Schools, only 3. The high school, Orange Avenue School, and Charlotte Avenue School. Halls, clubs, this is kind of interesting. Farmers Club, Granite Club, Women's Saturday Afternoon Club, and the Osceola Club. Have no idea. I need to look up that word and see if that would give a clue as to what kind of organization it was. And then secret and benevolent societies. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The SPCA is listed, however, that's a Los Angeles address. Everything else is a local organization. This was before any kind of government program of social assistance. way before Social Security. So what you did in those days, you belonged to one of these societies because one of the commitments was to support their members or their members' families in the event of disability or death. For example, I was reading by a family history recently, and the writer talked about her grandmother receiving financial aid from the Masonic Lodge that her husband lived or worked for or was a member of before he died. They took up a collection. And with that collection, she decided to relocate to California from Honduras. So yes, they engaged in, but it was a benevolent society. It's not listed because it did not yet exist, but the Elks was the BPOE, which stood for the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks. My mother used to say the biggest pigs on earth, or she might have substituted something else for pigs. But anyway, the BPOE, or the Elks Lodge. But Woodmen of the World, Ancient Order of United Workmen, Fraternal and Ancient Masons, Independent Order of Foresters. I mean, all these were social and benevolent groups. You had the camaraderie that was involved in belonging to the lodge, but you also had the assurance that there would be a support system there for your family in the event of your disability or death. Then we get into the section itself. Alphabetical by last name. For example, we have Dr. Adams, early Monrovia doctor, lists his residence, lists his office, lists his 3 daughters, Adams, Jenny, Miss, Alice, Adams, Alice, Miss, Adams, Francis, Miss, teacher, John Adams, Elsie Adams, and so forth and so on. Mrs. John Adams, house cleaner. That is Adeline Adams, Adeline Morris Adams, daughter of Aunt Caddy Morris. At that point in time, J.B. Adams himself was not in residence. Who knows where he was? But anyway, Adeline, his wife, was supporting her family single-handedly, it appears, by doing domestic housework. African Methodist Zion Church, corner of South Charlotte and East Falling Leaf, lists the minister. I'm not sure that Shiloh AME Zion necessarily has complete records about their early pastorates, but these are one way to fill in some of the gaps. American National Bank, carpenter, laborer, general contractor, printer, forest ranger. For example, we get to the Andersons, Louis H. Anderson, forest ranger, Lizzie H., Mrs. Anderson George H., clerk, First National Bank. That gives you a sampling. For example, E.S. Armstrong, Zad Harrow with the City Waterworks. If the head of household was male, in these directories, they did not list the wife. They only listed a daughter or a female head of household. Later on, after several years, they began to add the wife's name as well. So as I say, these are a great tool for research if you're trying to find who lived here. If you're trying to find an address, not so easy in these because they were not cross-indexed by address.
So this is not a telephone directory.
It is not a telephone, it's a residential directory.
So it's by name and not address and not phone number.
It provides the address, but it's not listed. It's not cross-indexed by address. The beauty of the Legacy Project is that these have been scanned and they're searchable, and if you're looking for a specific address, you can do a search by address and it'll bring it up. And then it'll show you who was living there at that address. These only show who was living there, and prior to them being scanned and becoming searchable, if you're researching a specific address, you simply had to scan the address, visually scan the address column until you found the address you're looking for or determined it wasn't listed.
And to access this document, you would have had to get in touch with Steve Baker or go to the library
or go to the
look at
library to get it.
But
Because
now it's all online.
this is a transcription done by Myron Hotchkiss, who had an original 1908-1909 city directory, much thinner volume with much smaller print. Myron, on a large print typewriter, laboriously transcribed all those addresses and all those names.
And the years we have are roughly,
The early ones are 1908, 1909, 1911, published in January of 1911, 1913 and 14, 1919, 1920, and the Monrovia Historical Museum has a 1916, 1917 that I believe has not been scanned or transcribed. I think they also have a 1922 that's not been, far as I know, not transcribed or scanned. By 1923, I didn't bring it, but by 1923 they were cross-indexing the directories in this rear section by address. You could look up street, address, and it would list the head of household. Then you could take that and go to the front directory and look up not only the head of household, but anyone else who was listed at that address. Questions?
what are these?
These are later bound ones. I brought these for my personal collection. You can tell by the bindings that they've been used just a little bit. They actually deserve rebinding, and I might try that. I brought a 1927, a 1931 and 32, a 1935, a 1937, and a 1939. Some of these Ancestry.com has scanned, and they appear if you do a search. Others have not been scanned. The 31 and 32 and the 35, to the best of my knowledge, have never been scanned. So let's see. Give me a name. Whom would you like to look up?
Um,
And a rough time frame.
in the 30s, Cronenwet.
Okay, let's try the 30. How about the 31, 32 and see what it has to say?
And then let's do Zelkowitz.
Okay. So earlier, before we recorded, we were talking about the Citizens Bank of Monrovia. This was once part of the collection of the Citizens Bank. And I got it from my dad's cousin, Dick Baker, whose uncle was Charlie Anson, who was invested in the Citizens Bank.
Which at that time was located where, Steve?
At the southeast corner of Myrtle and Foothill. Monrovia's second three-story building, actually the third three-story building. The first was a three-story rooming house in West Colorado. Then W.H. Evans building in 1909, then the Citizens Bank building. And none of those, well, the first floor of the Evans building still exists. It did not have an elevator, and that's why it only has a single floor instead of three. The story I got was the owner of the building could not rent the upper floors because no one wanted to walk up flights of stairs. It was cheaper to take off the top two floors than it was to install an elevator, so that's what he did. The rooming house was wood frame, three-story wood frame. It had an outside stairway, but nothing approaching an elevator, and the Citizens Bank building did. So we have here Cronenwet, actually it's misspelled, Cronenwit rather than Cronenwet, Albert E., wife, Minnie E., home, 150 Gold Hill. Cronenwet, Claire, artist, 150 Gold Hill.
Was that their hunting lodge? No, this
It was
is
west of the hunting lodge.
Okay.
Yeah, the hunting lodge was at what I think was 126.
North Myrtle?
It would have been
No.
North Street.
North
So let's see if there's a listing in here for North Street.
North Street?
North Street.
Where was
Still,
that?
well, it was an extension of Myrtle Avenue from the base of the foothills up. And I think it's been renamed. Well, this says north changed to East Scenic Drive, but there was another north that did go up the hill and then teed into Alta Vista.
Okay, so what you're looking at now is a part of that directory that is about the street?
This is the street an address. For example, let's see what they have for Gold Hill.
Talk about that little section, because that's very interesting.
Well,
of
in
this.
some of them, the earlier ones did not differentiate by color. The later ones, the address section was pink. And beginning with 27, it included both Arcadia and Duarte.
So this is listed by address.
This is listed by street and then by address.
Okay.
So for example, it says Gold Hill. It explains that Gold Hill was a continuation of North Myrtle Avenue, and the 150 was Cronowet AE. The other thing that makes it interesting, in many of these directories, they had a small o in parentheses indicating that that individual was the owner of the property.
Hmm.
Okay. Anyone
Oh,
else?
Zelkowitz.
Okay. Zelkowitz, Jack, wife Marion, Jack's Quality Shoe Store, home, 738 Oakdale Avenue.
Does it say where the shoe store was?
If I look up Jack's Quality Shoe Store, it will say. Jack's Quality Shoe Store, Jack Zelkowitz, owner, Florsham Shoes for Men and Women, 502 South Myrtle Avenue, telephone 4981. And what am I wearing today? Florsham shoes from the successor to Jack's Quality Shoe Store, which has been in business as a shoe store in that location for, about 95 years. Yeah.
And what was that? What's significant about that corner?
It was the very first lot purchased in Monrovia, May 17th, 1886, by Catherine Wilson of Duarte. And for that corner lot, she paid the incredible sum of $150. And then several months after the land boom kicked in, she sold it. Then she had buyer's remorse and she bought it back. We're talking not now 100, we're talking thousands, which will give you some idea of the madness that persisted during the land boom. Okay?
And that's the corner of Lemon,
Southeast corner, Lemon, and Myrtle.
just facing the Kiefer building.
South of the Kiefer building. Building itself dates from about 1904 or 1905, although you wouldn't know it from looking at it. It's been redone on the outside. I believe it was built by Henry Morris and had his grocery store there. And then later on, Ever Rariman had a seed store in that building. Yeah.
So these are wonderful resources for people who want to look up an
Well,
address or a person
Yeah.
or
the
a
U.S.
church?
Census, the census records are every 10 years, but these fill in the gaps between, and they're cross-indexed by street address. You could take a telephone directory, but that would have only the subscribers. It wouldn't have the residents. Maybe they were close, but some people even then did not have phones. So you can fill in the gaps in the census records with these, and sometimes locate information that probably you might not find anywhere else. So let's look in the 1937 directory, and let's look in Arcadia. I'm thinking about one household name. McDonald. This is the 1937 directory for Arcadia. McDonald, Patrick J. Fruit Juices, 141 Foothill Boulevard, Residence, Glendora. That's probably where, well, the story I got was that they got started by getting culled oranges from the packing houses in Glendora.
who is they?
the McDonald family. It sounds like maybe he was the one to start it.
This
Hard
is
to
the
say.
dad, Patrick.
The dad, Patrick, was the father. And the Coles were not marketable because of their appearance, but they were perfectly good from an orange juice standpoint. So they get the Coles at a very reasonable price, squeeze them, and then sell the orange juice. So this is 37. Now, any evidence of McDonald's in Monrovia? Let's take a look. Not a one. They had yet to appear on they being the brothers, the sons of Patrick, had yet to appear. But let's try the 39 directory. First of all, for Arcadia.
While you're looking that up, I'm noticing that on the bindings of these are advertisements.
Yes.
Some just Lumber Company, McDonald and Boyle.
Right. And they sold their advertising, which probably offset, and they sold the directories.
Mm-hmm. And who would have produced these?
This might have been done by the LA Directory Company.
Okay.
I mean, they were done by
First National Bank, Granite Savings.
individuals first. This is published by the Los Angeles Directory Company.
Okay. Got ads for the Furniture Company, the News Post.
Yeah, and here in the front it says the Monrovia Directory Library. Through the courtesy of the publishers of the Monrovia, Arcadia, and Duarte Directory Company, a directory library is maintained in the offices of the Monrovia Chamber of Commerce for free reference by the general public. So they place one there. So we find one Patrick J. McDonald, again, fruit juices, 141 East Foothill Boulevard, Residence, Monrovia. Monrovia. Well, let's take a look at Monrovia and see what comes up. We have Maurice J. McDonald, Residence, 534 East Colorado Boulevard. McDonald, Patrick J., wife Margaret. Home, 534 East Colorado Boulevard, indicating head of household. McDonald, Richard J., wife Marjorie. Home, 534 East Colorado Boulevard. No occupation given. But they were soon to correct that.
So you'll tell their whole story in a different video.
I will, but this is
great about.
But this is the lead-in to McDonald's and originating in Monrovia.
That was 1939.
This is the 1939. Let's see if there's anything having to do with airports, since that was.
So 534.
Oh, and I drove 534 is a nice little Spanish Revival inspired structure, single-family residence still. It looks like it might have been built in the 20s or 30s, and it's still there. I drove by this morning just to verify that it was in fact still there.
And it would have been a little crowded with all these folks.
It would have been a little crowded. There probably maybe 3 bedrooms, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, nothing under airport. How about?
And now you're looking in a
I'm just
section
scanning.
that's about.
Okay, for example, I'm in the E's.
What about Monrovia Flying
I
Field?
can find that. That was where I was headed until I stumbled over Earl Eno. Now, Earl Eno was a local builder. There are a lot of houses built by Eno in Monrovia. In fact, Lee Shamadan has made it a project to identify as many Eno houses as possible. When this was published in 39, he really hadn't started building houses on a full-time scale. He was still listed, not as a building contractor, but as a carpenter. He was a resident of 250 North Primrose Avenue. Whose house is that? The Monroes. It's the Oaks.
Wow.
So Earl was a single carpenter. He married later. Single carpenter renting a furnished room at the Oaks in 1939.
Oh.
So, I mean, this fills in so much information.
Again, now, are there copies of these in our library heritage room?
Not these.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these are not available online.
They are not. Let's see what we've got for Monrovia.
These are in the private collection of our city historian.
They
you.
are, which would explain their battered condition. Don't see anything for Monrovia Flying Field. How about Monrovia? Monrovia Airport Incorporated. Albert Blackburn, President. James, it says Most, M-O-S-T, I think it might have been Mast. Anyway, Vice President. Alvin Eager, Secretary. 1200 South Shamrock Avenue. So who was Alvin Eager? Well, he was the son of Franco Eager. Who was Franco Eager? A prolific Monrovia architect who designed lots and lots of houses in a number of different styles. First one I could ever find, which is no longer exists, was the Marshall home that later on at Primrose and Foothill that later became the Masonic Temple. But he designed all the way into the 20s and 30s. In fact, the house down the street from you at 217,
North Alta Vista?
yeah, West Side, designed by Frank Eager in a Mediterranean revival style. So anyway, 39, it was the airport rather than the flying field, and Al Blackburn was the owner, and thereby a tale to be told later. Okay, I was going to see if I could find out anything more on McDonald's. So I'm going to look.
So that was 1939. So we know by 1939 they were living in Monrovia.
They were.
Mm-hmm.
Now they weren't employed, so
And that's
apparently
about-
they'd not yet started.
When we get to the airport story, though, it seems to me that it was in 1939 that they signed the deed, Al Blackburn
Yes.
signed the deed.
Right, and the thing is, no telling when this was published. It might have been earlier in 39. It might have even been really late in 38. So that might explain some of the omissions that you would think would be here. So let's take a look on East Huntington. Yeah, there's a listing at 7:30 for a P.C. Miller Real Estate. I don't think that's the address of McDonald's.
Would they have even, well, this is maybe for that other story, but they just had a little stand, so maybe
Right.
it didn't even have an address.
I think it had an address.
Oh.
But anyway,
Oh, you found it, actually.
yeah, I found it at some point,
Mhm.
and I can't now tell you where, but I did find it.
Mm-hmm.
And nor there is anything here about the Big Orange.
Which was just across the street.
So those would have both been in the 700 block, and neither appears in the directory.
Of East Huntington.
Of East Huntington.
East Huntington.
Okay, any other locations? Oh, just because it's kind of fun, let's look at West Huntington.
Well, I wonder about the Ueda fruit stand.
Yeah, that's,
Is
okay.
that exactly where you were
Yeah,
going?
for example, we're looking at East Huntington Drive. As you might expect, there were service stations at the corner, at the intersection of Huntington and Myrtle. But at 124 was Dyegard Nurseries. which had-
124 East?
124 East Huntington, Dyegard Nurseries was its beginning location. At 138 East Huntington was the grocery store of Shujiro Morimoto. And then continuing east on Huntington, at 227 was Thomas W. Ross, father of...
Norman Ross.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the home Norman said he was born in because as an African American, you couldn't have babies in the hospital.
He was born at home. At 239, the East Side Community Center at Shiloh. Ida Snowden, who was a descendant of the families that came from South Carolina. Let's see, that would be, she would have been Ida Shaw, Duncan Shaw's daughter. A name I don't recognize at 427 East Huntington, Soyoshima, Sam Soyoshima.
So this is a mixture of homes and businesses.
Right. That's about it.
What about West Huntington?
Let's
Isn't
try
that
West.
where the Ueda?
Sure, let's start West Huntington. Okay. All right. At Primrose, 201 West Primrose, J.H. Kurumiya, the probably grandfather of Stephen Kurumia, who was a recent topic of conversation at a city council meeting. At 331 is Y. Uyeda.
And was that their fruit stand
That
or
was the
their?
that was the
Uh-huh.
fruit stand. Let's see if there's anything else, any other easily recognizable names.
But their story is told in our video about the Japanese families.
They are. So let's see for Kurumiya what it says. Okay, James H. Kurumiya, wife Hannah, fruits, 201 West Huntington Drive. Y. Uyeda, rancher, 331 West Huntington Drive. Rancher being the Strawberry King. Anyone else you can think of?
How about Sanford?
Jules didn't come until after he and Betty married.
Which would have been 1948.
Yeah,
Right.
There are, I didn't bring one, but they would be listed probably starting either in 48 or 50, which was the next one after the 48 directory.
When did Upton Sinclair come?
Probably right about this time. Let's see if he purchased from Vollmer. Let's see where Vollmer was listed as living in the 39 directory, which would give a clue. Yeah, 39, Louis Vollmer was still living at 464 North Myrtle, so he would have sold not too long after this to Sinclair.
I think that gives a great sense of what's in these wonderful
Yeah,
resources.
it is, and and then there's the alphabetical. There's an index to advertisers in the front of this. They advertise throughout the directory, but this is the invitation. Anyway, this is fun. The estimated population of Monrovia, heavy on the estimate, based on the number of individual names, is 15,000.
This is in 1939.
1939. What else?
Does it say who the city officials were?
Let's see if it's in here. Let me check this first section. This is fun. Industries of Monrovia. Among the industries located in Monrovia are the Day and Night Water Heater Company, manufacturers of solar, gas, and electric water heaters, Walker's Date Packing Company, Coast Pioneer Manufacturing, Monrovia Awning, Madison Manufacturing, Monrovia Sheet Metal Works, Monrovia Ice Company, Monrovia Laundry, Gillespie Grain and Milling Company, Banks Fruit Packing Company, Santa Anita Knitting Mills, Union Stove Company, BM Hubble Packing Company. Hubble did dates. Average wage, $5 per 8-hour day. Anything else?
No, those companies, the Day and Night Company.
Yeah.
We should,
And it's interesting that they still were manufacturing solar heaters in 1939. I thought they'd been phased out years before, but apparently maybe for certain climes. Yeah.
because they started very early
Yeah.
1900s, right?
Let's see what Bailey was listed doing. This is the 1908, 1909. Let's see if he's listed.
Because one of the houses in the early 1900s has solar panels that were
Right.
produced by them.
So in 1908, William G. Bailey, who had not yet invented the solar water heater, was living at 423 North Primrose, and his occupation was given as rancher, which meant he probably had oranges.
Did you look up the Raremans
Yeah, in 1908 they would have been,
on Palm?
yeah, but probably the first house
Uh-huh,
rather than the second house.
uh-huh.
So they would have
But
been,
it might list their
130.
bakeries.
might have been 131 West Palm. at that point. Yeah, Charles Rehrman, no occupation given, 131 West Palm,
That was their first.
before the second house was built, yeah.
Good.
Okay. Anything else on directories? How about a random question? Well, you already know who was in your house in 1927, but for instance,
Who was in my house? The Price? Ralph Price?
prices, sure. Okay, so, this is a good find. Not for right now, but I took a little 3x5 index card and put on there the transition street names. For example, the streets were originally in Monrovia in the southwest, originally 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, all renamed, and we'll talk about what they became. So let's see, probably Ralph and his mother.
Ralph Price.
Okay, so we have Emma, Ralph's sister, Emma H. Mary H., their mother, the mother, Mary H., and Ralph H., an electrician, all at 232 North Alta Vista. So who got the downstairs bedroom? Probably the mother, leaving the son and daughter to climb those stairs, right?
Probably.
Okay.
So I think this just makes people appreciate how fun it is to sit with the city historian as
Well,
he.
it's amazing what you can find, and
discovers.
you get this bird's eye view of a community at a particular, looking at the businesses that were there.
Businesses and churches.
Churches,
and how big it was.
organizations, social support systems, etc. So that's the story of the city directories. They continued being published until 1971 in Monrovia. The last one is the 1971. It's Monrovia only. In the 50s, they stopped including Arcadia and began publishing a separate directory for Arcadia. And then finally, towards the end, Duarte had its own separate directory, and it was on Monrovia only. As I say, last one published 1971.
Are any of these later ones in the library or
They
somewhere?
are. The later ones are. The earlier ones are there. What's missing from the library collection is the 30s.
And those are the ones that
These
you
are the
have.
ones, yeah.